Reviews. Addicted. This movie has a lot of problems. Briefly, it's the story of a young professional woman, Zoe, with a husband, Jason, who would be every woman's, and some men's, wet dream. He has a perfect, muscled body, a smile that could melt an iceberg, and he even washes the dishes. They have sex 2 or 3 times a day. Not a week, a day. But it isn't enough for her. She wants more. But more of what? That's one of the problems with this movie. There is a lot of sex in it, though none of it shocking by modern movie standards. But for all the sex, we still have to guess at what Zoe wants. Is it yet more sex? Different sex? Kinkier sex? Is this a distant cousin to 50 Shades of Grey that dares not speak of its desires? Zoe hooks up with an unsubtle but muscled white painter, who, in my eyes, has no talent, and has with him what looks like pretty much the same sort of sex she had been having with her husband. Then she hooks up with a messenger on a motorcycle. Their sex, though no doubt wonderful, looks pretty much the same as what she is having with the other 2 men, though it usually takes place on a table. In between all this, Zoe ignores her children and lets her work go down the drain. She is, we are to believe, a sex addict. That's the first problem. Zoe comes across as insatiable, but not really addicted. She only has men who are so astoundingly handsome, sexy that they would tempt all but the most virtuous. Yet if this movie had been called Insatiable *, she would have come across as a harlot rather than a sick individual to be pitied, and would have lost the sympathies of the intended audience of well-meaning 20 to 40-something women. If she were actually addicted to sex, she would have had sex with anyone, and that is not the case. She is only attracted to the hottest men. The second problem is that her poor husband, Jason, evidently detects nothing once Zoe is unfaithful to him, daily. When he does finally learn he's unhappy, of course, but we know so little about him, he's so poorly developed, that we still can't sympathize with him, though he is the potentially most sympathetic character in the movie. These actors could probably all have done a lot better if they had been given a script that had developed characters and not just cardboard cutouts. As it is, we get to watch a lot of evidently passionate sex performed by beautiful bodies, and then at the end have to listen to a few lectures on sexual addiction, which don't come across as very convincing. Zoe's particular case is never explored, so it's hard to believe in it or feel for her. Zoe's sexual problems with Jason needed to be made clearer. How was he failing her? Jason needs to have been given a character, it's not enough for him just to look great. The script just doesn't make any of the characters interesting and sympathetic, and that's fatal here. I watched this on DVD from my public library. Based on the title, it tells a story that could be any addiction, drugs, alcohol, sex, and the main protagonist goes through the various phases. And there is a ray of hope at the end. Sharon Leal, 40-ish, is Zoe Reynard and has formed her own company, Zoe & Company, to represent and find financial opportunities for artists. She apparently is good at it, but the one time we see her approaching a new client she is rather passive. Maybe because she was attracted to him. Indeed, he romances her and agrees to be represented mainly because he wants her. She in turn has developed a sex addiction, and although she has a great family and loves her husband, she cannot control her lustful desires. This drama plays out more like a B movie, especially during the last half hour or so. It is interesting but not too memorable. Boris Kodjoe is good as the architect husband Jason Reynard. Wow, where to begin? Everything about this movie is horrible. I suffered for 40 minutes through this drivel in the hopes the lead actress, Sharon Leal, would do some of her old Boston Public magic and make the film worth watching. However, all she did was drag an already drowning film under. From the outset, the film looks, feels and sounds like a daytime soap opera. The acting is so bad I felt embarrassed for the actors. I don't know if the producers of this crap live in the real world, but in my version psychologists do not have sessions that run all day and into the wee hours of the night. What the hell? And since when do supposed successful artists drive beat up old '68 Chevy with the paint literally peeling off? Believe me, there is nothing in this movie worth taking seriously. What a shame Sharon Leal couldn't find something to actually bring her back into the light, instead of having the lights turned off and the door slammed shut. Terrible, just terrible. When I first saw that there was a movie coming out, I was excited and apprehensive at the same time. I've come to accept based on the book, novel, bestseller, etc. As a disclaimer that if you have read the book you should probably expect the movie to be loosely based, with kudos given to movies who stick to the book while keeping the cinematic liberties to a minimum. But boy oh boy does this adaptation go beyond taking liberties. Except for the characters and very few key scenes, this could have been a totally unrelated movie. Without giving away any spoilers, basically the main character is addicted to sex, so you would think that there would be a whole lot of exposition, especially with the backdrop being dialogue between the main character and a therapist. But okay, let's say you haven't read the book, or it's been a while since you have. There's so much missing as to why this woman has an addiction to sex. Why does she cheat? Why should we care that she cheats? She's painted as this spoiled and deprived woman who you don't feel sorry for, when, in the book, there's actually a lot that went on in her past that affects her present. There's no examination of the main character and the relationships she has. This movie was an hour and 45 minutes long. I could have maybe dealt with the other stuff that wasn't included if there was a portion devoted to her past and not the 2.5-second flashback in one sentence literally at the end of the movie where we're just supposed to go, "Oh, it all makes sense now," and walk out satisfied. While Addicted was erotic fiction, it still kept you on the edge of your seat because you wanted to find out what happened next. I couldn't put it down. All the movie did was show some softcore sex scenes, some violence, and then it hopped, skipped and jumped to the end. If you've read the book, this isn't worth your time or money. And if you haven't, well, you've been warned. Wait till it comes out on cable. It's a shame too, the cast was really let down. Since I am an addiction psychologist specialist, in training, I was forced to watch this all the way through. This is actually one case scenario I have not yet battled with any client. But I do understand the therapist in this movie and how she used addiction lingo to get her message across to her client. She got it across to me as well. As a therapist, this is a case that you would use psychoanalytic theory to get at the harbored suppressed past, and I think they actually portrayed the addiction very well. I did feel very sorry for her husband, handsome husband, who is faithful and has this kind of woman for a wife. But love does conquer all. It is not so easy in real life, but the message was real and there for anyone who really is looking. Thank you, Lady Ann 68. I would not recommend this movie to anyone unless you are interested in adult films or porn. The storyline was predictable, cliché and boring. The movie had no excitement, the plot was simple, and not a thriller by far. The only good thing about this movie was how good-looking the actors were. Many of the sex scenes were not needed. The main character is obviously sick. The movie magnifies how the main character is struggling with her addiction. By showing her abuse the addiction over and over and over. The plot does not move beyond the point. It's like watching an obese person suffer from overeating. We have established that point. Can we move on now? But the movie continues to revolve around the obsession of the addiction, which in return bore the viewers because they are watching the same actions happen repeatedly, over and over and over again. It's like watching a 3-minute video clip over and over and over again. The plot does not expand to any dimension. It is as flat and dry as bread, with no butter. I went to this movie mostly because of the show times of other movies we really wanted to see that we would have had to wait several hours for. I read one of the users' reviews and thought, maybe not too bad, and it had the word thriller, as in crime thriller in the IMDb heading. I thought it may be a nice twisted psycho-type flick, spiced up a bit by the sexual addiction line. Based on the best-selling novel by Zane, Addicted is a sexy and provocative thriller about desire and the dangers of indiscretion. Lionsgate plot summary. It was totally off the mark. Bad acting, bad scripting, bad direction. I have seldom been misled by user reviews, often by critics, so I was upset. Money and time are totally wasted. There were only 10 others in the theater, so that should have been a warning. Hopefully, I haven't given anything away here other than a warning, don't go. A little more romantic than most recent films about sex addiction like Nymphomaniac Part 1 and 2, but thankfully the movie does not dumb down the condition. Instead, it simplifies it greatly. The movie focuses on a happily married woman who fills a void in her life when an affair with another man triggers her sex addiction using a more romantic approach. The entire cast did a good acting job. I've never seen William Levy in anything before, but first thought he played a good mistress in this film. Lead actress Sharon Leal and Boris Kodjoe were also good in the movie. Not as melodramatic as you would expect from movies like this, and it had some pretty awesome love scenes. A winning combo for me. Addicted is essentially an uneven facade that in one instance, poses as softcore porn and in another instance, becomes a documented, public service announcement for sex addiction. It's a slick, trashy, yet mildly entertaining soap opera of a movie that unbeknownst to me, goes completely off the rails in its final half hour. Directed by the guy who made Honey 2003 and Beauty Shop 2005, and based on a best-selling novel of the same name, Addicted is like a carbon copy of 2002's Unfaithful. But where Unfaithful had a murder and a sword cover-up to that murder, this limited October release has a silly, kill-free twist at the end. I'm not gonna count a failed suicide as murder in case you're keeping score. It also has many more love scenes in it than Unfaithful, not to mention a main character that ends up having more than just one affair. The story begins with stunning, happily married businesswoman Zoe Reynard, played by Sharon Leal. She has the perfect life. She has 2 great kids, a husband who thinks the world of her, a loving, caring mother who lives with her and is quite tolerable, and a beautiful home via the outskirts of Atlanta, GA. But wait a minute, her perfect husband isn't fulfilling her everyday needs, sexually that is. He's never around and is always working. Her solution? Have a series of romantic trysts with a well-revered painter Quentin Canosa played by William Levy, and a womanizing club hopper Corey played with minimal dialogue by Tyson Beckford. This leads to her addiction, by which she literally ruins her career, fractures her family values, is forced to see a shrink, and decides in anguish to, spoiler alert, commit freeway suicide. As mentioned earlier, Addicted walks a fine line between glamorizing sexuality and reiterating a certain sickness. As a result, the proceedings are choppy and disjointed despite a surprisingly good level of unpredictability. Really, in truth, this vehicle is almost saved by Sharon Leal. She gives a solid, realistically grim performance in the lead role as Addicted's disturbed test subject. As for the rest of the cast, they are mostly good-looking people whose acting is not as seething or as sharp. In conclusion, this is a poster child for the effects of sex addiction, and to be honest, it's not really about infidelity. Addicted, in its 106-minute running time, makes 2 mistakes. It turns a character, Levy's Canosa, who doesn't really seem menacing enough, and makes him psychotic. The second mistake is that this thing climbs too close to becoming a therapeutic healing session for a specific audience, people that go to support groups for sex addiction or don't bother to get help at all for said addiction. And as the plot thickens, it feels less like an actual film-going experience and more like a hidden cry for help. Bottom line, Addicted as a drama thriller may offer a certain kind of appeal. But for me, it just wasn't that addicting. A happily married family woman and mother explains to a psychotherapist that she has given into a desire to have sex with assorted other men. That's the plot, folks, about 15 minutes worth, I reckon. Yet it takes an hour and 3/4 to tell it in a film peppered with sex scenes which don't actually have any sex in them, substituting coy avoidance instead. Yes, US cinema continues its perverse relationship with sexual matters whereby it is preoccupied with sex, but avoids actually showing and frankness on screen. Beware the nipple, civilization will fall. This film manages to be lurid, lame, prissy and interminably tedious all at the same time. Do, please, try to avoid it. I love movies and never walk out. I walked out of this one after sitting through a painful 40 minutes or so. It is hideously awful in every way, terrible script written by idiotic middle school kids. God awful, idiotic acting and directing. It was boring to boot, even though it was supposed to be about sex addiction, and it was supposed to have beautiful people in it. It wasn't even good as porn. Actual porn is far better, even as non-porn, than this. The leading actress was not beautiful, or believable in any way. None of the actors had any credibility, nor did they rescue any part of the incomprehensibly stupid script so as to make any moment seem even vaguely possible or real. Was everyone associated with this film a complete idiot with an IQ below 80? Yes, sexual addiction is a very real addiction, and this movie doesn't treat it with kid's glove. Definitely lets you know about the manipulation and hiding that can go with this disease. Definitely some good acting, and even the ones who are victimized by the disease are treated fairly in how they are portrayed, and they can't get off lightly either, in some cases even showing the enabling. Has a hopeful and some would say sappy ending, but a definite true movie. The idyllic life of a successful businesswoman, wife, and mother of two is about to be uprooted as she nears middle age. She suddenly is stricken with sex addiction as a result of a horrible rape she endured but doesn't recall as a 10-year-old girl approximately 25 years ago. We know this to be true of the beautiful Zoe by the end of the movie because we are told it is true. It is evidenced by repeated reference to a missing memory, an unexplained scar, and finally a dream near the conclusion where Zoe finally remembers. In the final moments of the movie, Zoe relates this information to her group of sex addicts, their psychiatrist, and finally her husband as he enters the room. The writers, director, producers, and the original novel dictate it is true, so we must accept it to be so. It is the name of the movie after all. She is addicted to sex. And it just happened. Out of nowhere, just as she started a torrid sexual affair with a talented local artist. We are told she is addicted to sex, not having an affair. As she and her new lover view some of his work and have public sex, it is because of an addiction. As she poses nude for paintings for him and they then have sex, it is because of an addiction to sex and not a sordid affair. As she looks upon various other nude paintings of various young women with great jealousy, she is somehow not having an affair with this fellow but is just addicted to sex. As she discovers him sleeping with his neighbor and reacts with more jealousy, we are to believe she was not having an affair but was merely addicted to sex. As her artist lover asks her to leave her husband and she tells her psychiatrist she is tempted to do so, somehow her counselor interprets this to be a sex addiction and not her having a family-crushing extramarital affair. She is a beautiful woman. She could walk into any bar, gym, grocery, or bus station and say to the hottest guy, "If you have an hour, I will have you," and that guy will likely have uncomplicated anonymous sex with her. That is what an addict would do. She does nothing even close to that, and we are told she is addicted to sex while she pursues and is pursued by her lover in a typical cheater fashion. But wait, there is another fellow she starts sleeping with. That will make two other men besides her husband. When one lover gets too clingy, she starts another affair. This hardly seems like an addiction, but we have been told it is so. If you are a woman who is addicted to sex, I hope you are as lucky as Zoe to come across the real-life male model Tyson Beckford playing Corey. Her first sex with Corey, as I recall, was a quickie in a public bathroom at a club. This actually fits the mold for what I would call a hookup fitting a sex addict. Yet on their next tryst, Zoe gets all dressed up and wears uncharacteristic red lipstick. They party late into the night, rolling around on the floor drinking booze and snorting cocaine. Sex addiction apparently involves an hours-long drug-induced hot date while your husband and family wait at home wondering where you are. Just to be clear, she was on a date. She was not just hooking up with someone for sex. Just as with her first lover, she is hanging out with him having a good time. She is on a date. She is cheating on her husband. As she prepares to enter their home where her husband is waiting, she pauses to wipe away the red lipstick. She's just a little drunk and stoned with some disheveled clothing, but the trusting husband won't suspect anything if she's not wearing the red lipstick. To be clear, Zoe is merely a cheating wife. About 3 minutes of this movie are devoted to anything resembling sex addiction. Most people like sex. Cheaters certainly like sex. This movie is an embarrassment to the subject of sex addiction and has little to do with it. However, the part when Jason accepts the diagnosis and takes her back to a round of applause from the sex addicts group members, just as the credits start to roll, helps to at least draw attention to the real thing. I really think Sharon Leal did a good job with the character Zoe considering the implausible plot. Boris Kojo playing the part of husband Jason gets my coveted Oblivious Husband award for actually seeming to believe the lies of his cheating Zoe. That took some skill. Tyson Beckford. is a great male model. Trigger warning. Rape scene. Before 50 Shades of Grey was synonymous with mainstream erotica, there was the author Zane. Someone who wrote erotic books featuring black characters and even had a soft-core porn series if I recall right. Though with it being a long time since Zane's name was big, and with Tyler Perry's Temptation, Confessions of a Marriage Counselor still being fresh enough to remember. Does Addicted prove itself to be the best, as well as the original, or did all Zayn do is open the door as bigger and better productions got through? Characters and story. Zoe, Sharon Leal, has a lot going for her in life. She has a gorgeous husband, named Jason Boris Kojo. 2 beautiful kids, a mother, Nina Maria Howell, who lives with them and allows her and her husband to work full-time, and pull in extra hours. And she has her own business. One which, thanks to her marketing expertise, and best friend Brina Emiatsi Coronildi, is quite the success. Well, at least until famous artist Quentin Canosa William Levy comes in. From meeting him, to being alone with him in his studio, something awakens in her which creates this desire to have sex. Something she tries to fix with a woman named Dr. Spencer Tasha Smith, but the ecstasy, and other things, are too good to just give up. Leading you to wonder if perhaps Zoe may be able to have it all, or whether her secrets will destroy all she has worked and fought so hard for. Praise. Being that I went to see this movie with a black majority audience, naturally, there was talking throughout the movie and damn if I didn't want to join them. For truly the stuff which happens in the film will have you wanting to mumble something under your breath. Whether it is because of the things Zoe gets into while on a downward spiral, the things Quentin does around, or to her, or even just waiting for anyone, whether it is Jason or Nina, to catch her, you will easily get caught up in the moment and want to throw your own 2 cents in there. Criticism. While the book for Addicted came before Tyler Perry's movie, oddly enough his film was overall more entertaining. If just because Leal as Zoe has this Olivia Pope vibe and Brina very much seems like a gladiator. And with probably the most interesting thing about this film being the sex scenes, or the moments before Zoe initiates sex, it makes you wonder if any thought was really put into making Jason interesting, or even making Zoe's second sex partner Corey Tyson Beckford more than someone she just meets in the club. For while I get that the focus is on Zoe, at times I felt like there was a stronger need to show how guilty she felt and why. While it is understood her husband is attractive and good to the kids, I feel the stuff we saw in TP's Temptation gave us reason to root for the relationship seen on screen. As for Addicted, to me, Zoe and Jason at best just came off like 2 attractive actors mashed together, due to name recognition, who represented 2 people who had babies and have sex every now and then. Overall, TV viewing. It is sort of sad that, in the grand scheme of things, you could make the argument TP may have been inspired by Zayn's work when it comes to him creating Temptation. However, like with The Maze Runner, while you may see the film was inspired, in the long run, there is this sense that only what worked, and was good, was taken before the film went to find its own voice. Now, as for Addicted, being that the sex addiction angle isn't made to be that interesting, since more so it seemed Zoe was bored in her marriage than a sex addict, I must admit while I was laughing at what my fellow theater goers were saying, and thought they made interesting points, I think this movie would have been a lot more dull without their commentary. Hence the TV viewing label for truly the comments made throughout the film I think are what made this not something to skip. While no performance was bad, and the sex I'm sure will get some hot and bothered, the story just didn't explore any character enough for me to feel like I should be invested. And, in the long run, I feel that sex was used to compensate for a weak story.